The racing season is over and we're already looking ahead to next year. The 2022 race cars have been driven for the last time in a test in Abu Dhabi. These test drives gave us hints about what the cars will look like in the new season. Like always, there are some rule changes coming, especially after a year where we saw some really big rule changes. Today we'll talk about which changes are coming next year and some teams are not happy about all the changes. With so many changes to the car rules in 2022, there were bound to be problems. These rules have been worked on for years, but when you have 10 teams made up of some of the world's smartest car designers, you're going to find stuff that the racing bosses missed. The Aston Martin rear wing is a perfect example of this. It clearly didn't follow the rules. The teams also found certain things by accident, like the bouncing problem called porpoising. This hasn't affected all teams the same way, and some have clearly found it to be a bigger problem than others. Yes, we're looking at you, Mercedes. So which changes are we going to see in 2023, and who do you think will end up winning after these changes? Let us know what you think in the comments below after you've watched the video. First, Pirelli will have one more tire type to choose from for each race. The harder tires didn't work well this year and will be replaced with an even harder tire next year. So there will be 6 different tire types ranging from CO to C5. This will be one of the biggest changes. Next to adding an extra tire type, Pirelli has tried to make the tires for next year much better because this year they showed us that drivers relied too much on tire strategy instead of actual racing. We'll be watching for this when the 2023 cars hit the track. Some of the other car changes will be really important changes to how air flows around the car. The key upgrades for the 2023 F1 season are about the car's floor and are meant to get rid of porpoising once and for all. The racing bosses said that safety was the main reason for these improvements, but several teams disagreed with this claim. The groups have since made an agreement, and the World Motorsports Council has approved the rule changes. They're raising the floors, edges. The racing bosses originally wanted to increase the floor edges by 25 mm, but this has been decreased to 15 mm. This happened after loud complaints from F1 teams who've already dealt with porpoising and can just lower the ride height instead. Along with a 15 mm increase, tests to measure up and down bending are being introduced by 2023. A maximum movement of 5 mm in both directions will be allowed. Right now, the maximum allowed bending for a downward force is 8 mm and 12 mm for an upward load. The racing bosses want to make it harder to seal the underneath of the car by limiting how much the floor can bend, which is combined with the higher edges. Raising the floor as edges will make it harder for teams to physically seal the Venturi tunnel from outside air pressure. Getting more downforce from the bottom of the car is now possible, but there is a risk of blocking airflow and causing porpoising. The Venturi tunnels are slots under the car that create downforce by speeding up the air underneath, creating a low-pressure area because of the Venturi effect. The effect is to suck the car towards the ground while making only a small amount of dirty air behind the car. The diffuser throat is getting bigger. The throat is the narrowest point of the underfloor tube. The pressure change happens at that point, speeding up airflow and creating downforce. The throat is located at the back of the tunnel right below the driver's seat. The last few millimeters of space between the throat and the ground can see a huge increase in airspeed. However, at some point that gap can get too narrow, causing the flow to stop. The racing bosses want to raise the diffuser throat to make the car's underside handle changes in ride height better. The car's minimum weight will be reduced a little bit in 2023. The minimum weight will be 796 kilos, down from the 798 kilograms in 2022. This change comes after the minimum weight for the 2022 Formula One season was raised because most teams struggled to get the car to the right weight. Front wing rules are getting stricter. During the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, Mercedes created a stir by showing off an amazing front wing with several flaps designed to increase downforce. However, the racing bosses will allow less freedom in front wing design in 2023, meaning that such an extreme design would most likely not be seen again. Roll bar changes are coming. Following Zhou Guanyu's scary crash at the British Grand Prix, roll bar adjustments were considered necessary after the part proved unable to handle the impact of the crash and broke off. The part must be able to handle greater loads as well as a 15 grams collision with the ground. Also, starting in 2023, the roll bar must be able to withstand both forward and backward forces. Another safety improvement will be made to the mirrors. The surface areas of the mirrors will be made bigger to improve blind spot visibility. Some of the other smaller car changes are sensors that measure up and down forces with high precision. Starting at Spa-Francorchamps, sensors designed to capture the impact of collisions will detect the up and down forces on the bodies. These sensors will serve 2 purposes for the rest of the season. But in 2023, special sensors will be installed to monitor up and down forces more accurately. There are new rules about fuel temperature. The racing bosses decided to propose a rule change after fuel temperature issues came up many times during the 2022 F1 season. While the fuel must not be colder than 20 degrees Celsius in 2022, it must not be colder than 10 degrees below the outside temperature starting in 2023 in cold weather. A minimum temperature of 10 degrees Celsius will be enforced. A weather service chosen by the racing bosses will record the outside temperature 1 hour before a practice session or 3 hours before the race. How tires are used during qualifying will also change during the 2 qualifying sessions next year. Drivers will be required to use specific tire types during each part of the qualifying session as a test. The total number of tire sets allowed during race weekend will be reduced from 13 to 11. Drivers will be given 4 sets of soft tires instead of 8 during the 2 qualifying sessions for this test, while the number of mediums and hards will be increased from 3 to 4 during each stage of qualifying. Drivers must use a different tire type: the hard tire in Q1, the medium tire in Q2, and the soft tire in Q3. Next to these changes, there will also be some changes on the grid, with the following 3 changes to watch out for in 2023. There will be more sprint races. As previously announced, there will not be 3 but 6 sprint races in 2023. This was also the racing boss's original plan for the 2022 F1 season, but the governing body was unable to reach an agreement with the teams on it. The number of sprint races in 2023 will be double that of 2022. The curfew rules will also be changed to give more rest to F1 teams' mechanics. Given the busy calendar, the curfew will be extended to 14 hours before the start of FP3 in 2023, up from 13 hours now. It is planned to increase to 15 hours by 2024. There will also be fewer exceptions. Friday exceptions will remain the same. They'll be granted twice a year, but the number of exceptions on the days before will be greatly reduced. On Wednesday, 8 exceptions are currently allowed. This number will decrease to 4 in 2023, and then to 2 in 2024. On Thursdays, the number drops from 6 to 3 in 2023, and then to 2 in 2024. Grid penalties are being clarified. Following the big confusion about how grid penalties work at the Italian Grand Prix, it became clear that the racing bosses needed to look at the rules again. As a result, the governing body issued a new version of the regulations for both 2022 and 2023 on October 19th, making grid penalties clearer. Drivers with grid penalties of 15 places or less will be given a temporary starting position, equal to their qualifying result plus the grid penalty. If 2 or more drivers are placed in the same position, the order will be determined by qualifying times. In that case, the driver with the slowest time will keep their current place while the driver with faster times will pass them. After that, drivers with no grid penalties will be given the empty starting positions in the order of their qualifying results. Drivers with grid penalties will be moved up to any empty starting spots after this allocation. Drivers who have more than 15 grid penalties must start behind every other classified driver. If this applies to multiple drivers, the qualifying results will be used to establish the order. Drivers who did not set a time during qualifying but were given permission to start by the stewards will be given a starting position behind all classified drivers. The classification in FP3 or FP1, if it is a sprint weekend, determines the relative order in this case. If a driver does not have a time to their name due to a disqualification, they will start after racers who did not qualify for other reasons. Also, starting 2023, the rule will be that no more than 5 grid positions will be penalized for replacing gearbox parts. In 2022, it looked like the timing of gearbox changes could affect the sequence of issuing grid penalties, but this should be resolved by next year. When changing multiple parts, the maximum grid penalty will be applied to one part instead of a sum of penalties from each part. Now, you're up to speed with all the rule changes coming up for the 2023 season. Which of these changes surprised you the most, and which one will change the